I was going to do that thing they used to make us do. I too am a product of a religious education. They would actually make us put our fingers on our lips so we wouldn't speak. I would say this. I would agree with Ole's point about participation. All right. And one of the fun things about being me, all right, is that because I'm the child of a politician, I don't have to explain my politics to anyone. People assume, well, you're the child of a large PLP politician, so you're a PLP, you can't help yourself, you don't think, you don't really have opinions, which is great because then I can stay out of all Bahamian political conversations when it is divisive. The things that I think are good, I think it is really, as Ole said, I think because we have turned it into a kind of social culture that people take political participation as ordinary, as normal. And this thing where I'm a paper US citizen by a complicated route, which I won't bore you with. You know, the idea that you wouldn't vote, it's just like I've had to ask my students. I'm lucky because I have them. I said, walk me through it. You know, what is the choice to not do that? You know, even if you think all the candidates are, you know, are rubbish and yeah. So I do think that in that sense, the majority of Bahamians, even younger ones, even younger ones still think that political participation is a thing that normal adults do. And that is a normal citizen and it's a part of your citizenship. All right. But I do think, and we didn't invent this problem. Someone mentioned the Commonwealth. All right. I do think that we have fallen, like a lot of post-colonial democracies and a lot of model democracies, including the United States, into a sense that we don't want real distinction in our political parties, that we don't want real debate about ideas. And I said, we did not invent that problem. All right. But I do think as a small country, we actually have an opportunity, all right, to do better. It's hard to look at a boulder the size of the United States and say, well, gosh, we can change it. Like I have a friend I went to college with who's an American, married a person in Germany and is now a German politician. What I want for the Bahamas is actually what do they call the thing? A parliament that looks like these German municipalities where you got your little club, your little crowd of socialists over here, you know, and then your Christian conservatives who vex about whatever it is they vex about over here. And then they make these coalition governments so that there's a full bore, you know, and that's what I actually think. And it's tricky because people have full lives, to Ole's point. All right. You know, and we have a citizen democracy where people who are MPs and people who aspire to that kind of leadership, as in any country, there are often people who are ambitious and believe they could make a little bit of change. I just had this conversation with my students at the end of my June term class. So, but I think the Bahamas is so small that and I'll get back to the first thing I said. If I say I want more ideas, more aggressive ideas, more like, even if it means if I find the ideas of the FNM closer to where I am, but I don't get picked as the candidate, I'm going to be okay with that because I'm invested in the ideas.
Yeah, but
I can go try to get picked somewhere else. And I think our politics has become, and as I said, we didn't invent that. Yeah. But I want more ideas in our politics because we are losing. We now have Bahamian young people that say as many US young people. It's like, what a difference between these fellas, and they're still mostly fellas. All right. And I don't want that. All right. Like, I think we have an opportunity with this 50th to get more ideas in there.
But Dr. Tinker Sachs, you made the point about we are not open-minded. Perhaps we need to find a way to grow the country in terms of the number of people that we have participating. There is a view, panelists, that we are an underpopulated country, that we are grossly underpopulated, and as a result, we are underperforming because we are underpopulated.
Underpopulated? What
Yes,
do you mean?
underpopulated.
I don't know how they mean by that.
I never heard of that either.
I'm like, we have enough Bahamians. First of all, it's not like Bahamians are well resourced and supported. Mostly, if we're honest, the Bahamas is the sixth most expensive cost of living in the world. We have like a five.
Let me explain. Because
so I can tell you why
we have probably the third largest country in the Caribbean. We have Andros with about under 10,000 people. We have Crooked Island with 250 or so people. Auckland's probably have about 400 people. Cat Island has about 4,000 to 5,000 people, if that. So when you look at the archipelago in terms of the population and the people who reside on these islands that have been provided infrastructure for development, those islands are grossly underpopulated.
First of all, I've been to the Family Islands. So I'm like, I think, if we're honest, I don't think the Bahamas is doing enough in terms of government support and providing aid and social services to the existing Bahamians we have. I think a lot of Bahamians live underneath the poverty line. A lot of Bahamians are struggling, living check to check. Their paychecks barely have anything in it. We have an incredibly expensive cost of living. And so I think we have enough on our hands dealing with those Bahamians. And then just from another perspective of, I ain't never seen a benefit in having too much people. A lot of these, all these countries with their large populations, they don't do nothing but talk about it from the perspective of stress and headache and more things to do. And then third on the level, Bahamians are the best kept secret. I don't have a problem with the fact that we don't have a mass overswelling of people and the fact that we tend to be in our own places. You know what I mean? We tend to be there and we're taking our time. I don't think our underperformance, first of all, I want to say underperformance is relative, but you know what I mean? I don't think we are underperforming by virtue of, where we're at, where we should be, time, the size of our country, all these different things. But in the ways in which we could perform more and ways in which we want to accelerate as a country, I don't think that is negatively impacted by having less people.
Let's hear Dr. Tinker Sachs.
Well, first, I really, it's very hard for me to make generalizations without specific data, without looking at specific examples of how we are qualifying and interpreting what we're saying. Mm-hmm. So I tend to be very careful, and I can really truly speak only for education sector. But I would go back to saying that it's not about having a small population. It's not about being too small or underpopulated or anything like that. It's about diversifying the economy. And it does go back to there are strong inequities, being in the school.
How do you get real diversification if you are underpeopled?
Well, a lot of people are not in the Bahamas because there hasn't been room for them to grow and develop and expand with their ideas because we have a limitation in terms of how can we diversify and contribute to the development of the country. Now, when we go back to the small-mindedness again, and because you are small, here is the thing about being small. We know one another. And we look out, nepotism reigns, as in most countries, but in the Bahamas it's stronger because we know one another. So I'm looking out for my family members first.
But you need economy of scale. You need to
There is the thing here, but it can't be economy of scale unless you have people who can expand, and we can talk about immigration then. There are a lot of people who want to come to the Bahamas. Let's put it out there, guys. There are a lot of people who want to come to the Bahamas and live in the Bahamas and benefit from being in the Bahamas.
Yeah.
Right. What do we have to say about that? Because we don't want the Haitians there, right? I'm gonna put it out there.
Listen, we don't want Haitian phobia.
Yes. Let's talk about the various phobias that we have. And there are many people who believe that we are very selfish in terms of granting citizenship to people who really should have citizenship in the Bahamas, or people who want citizenship in our country.
And the Bahamas makes it uncomfortable. The Bahamas has so much anti-foreign sentiment, xenophobia, anywhere else, that it makes it uncomfortable for even people who are truly Bahamian, just because Bahamians play a purity politics game, or who is Bahamian. Like I said, I asked to move to America. I convinced my parents. I love I love my country. I love my country. There are things I understand now as an adult. I have a perspective. I could frame it. I feel a sense of my Bahamian identity. I love my country. I rally for my country. But growing up, I did not feel that way about the Bahamas, because even though born and raised Nassau, Bahamas, my family of Hyframs, Hannahs, Hasties, Times, they Bahamian from the country start. But because my name is Nigerian and my daddy is Nigerian, Bahamians made me feel that every second of every day. And even to this day, when I go home, you can't do nothing without them. What's your name? Why are people name you that? Or your hey, but me meet him. You know what I mean? That kind of sentiment is what you're growing up with, until people feel like, you know what? Let me go. That was why I was like, you know what? No, I didn't feel that sense of cultural belongingness in the country. So I said, let me bounce. And I know a lot of Bahamians that feel similarly. And I think that's reflected. I think that is a problem. And I also, to the last point, yes, we do need to diversify our economy. But the fact that our economy is not diversified is not a reflection of the amount of people. It's a reflection of where we place our emphasis. All we do is encourage Bahamians in school. We talk about tourism. We talk about tourism and going into the hotel industry and stuff like that. It's insane that we are blessed enough to have a small nation, a Black nation, where we get to see ourselves reflected in all these aspects of the country and governance and leadership roles. And I appreciate what that meant for me in terms of being able to see opportunity for myself. But imagine you take a whole country full of Black people where they should be able to see themselves in all these much larger capacities. And yet, in their formative years, you spending time encouraging them to pursue roles in which they serve others, and imagine combine what is a natural inherent xenophobia towards foreigners, right, in certain capacities, but also this like kind of like worship and reveling of like white tourists and these people. It's a dangerous combination, and I think that affects our mentality.
Let me hear Scott Turnquist on the point.
So I think I'm sympathetic to the view of like, to a degree. I can be sometimes sympathetic to where the xenophobia comes from, because it comes not just from those, it comes from both sides, right? So I think we should also talk a little bit about the perception of foreigners, largely expats, right, who will come in and occupy positions that you would often say you would feel as though Bahamian is qualified for. So I think I can be sympathetic to that view, but I think that I really need to hopefully maybe like reemphasize a point that Dr. Sachs said, and it has to do with diversifying the economy. And I think it also goes back a little bit to being able to create owners, not just employees, because to your point, Ambassador Jones, about us being underpopulated, to take an extreme example, the solution is not to take X numbers of people from Nassau and drop them on Andros, because you have to then ask about the skill set and the ability to create something in that space. Now look, humans, Bahamians in general, we are creative, we will adapt. But I think that what we're missing in the conversation is that so many of these things are intertwined, and it's largely systems that interact with each other. Having the emphasis on laborers rather than owners, under education, and even actually a concentration of our economy in Nassau, I think are some of the vicious cycles that contribute to some of the problems that we're seeing, right? It's sort of funny, right? Because when you said, Ambassador Jones asked if Nassau has a underpopulation problem, everybody on the Zoom channel who's actually from Nassau laughed, right? Because it's hard to actually imagine, but you're right. Athens, Long Island, Abaco, right? It's not an issue on New Providence, right? But I think that only speaks to as far as we've come and all of the things that we should be proud of. If we would acknowledge some of the missed opportunities, it would actually be in spreading some of those economic opportunities outside of the capital.
Okay, Dr. Adderley, I have a friend who tells me that we have 50-year-old problems in the Bahamas, let's talk about the extent to which we have some structural problems that we have been unable to to resolve structural social problems, for instance?
I'll give two answers to that, one economic, one cultural. The economic one gets to something that we've been talking about, is that I think very much the 50-year-old problem that we have is that the duty of the first independence government of the Bahamas was to think about essentially how could they effect a fairly substantial amount of economic development that would improve the socioeconomic circumstances of the majority of the population. And in a post-World War II environment with the US dollar and the United States becoming its global currency, and it's our principal means of doing business with the global world. They sat and they said, how can we, essentially, what are the paths by which we can quickly, all right, because human suffering is real. What are the paths by which we can quickly, all right, do this? And they did two very good things. One is that the tourism and the offshore banking things were not, they may not have been the best long-term economic decisions. And Eric Williams was notorious. All right, probably certainly among our most distinguished Caribbean-based patriots for his critique of the dangers of tourism and its limits. But they did but the other part of that was they also made a commitment, and it gets to something we have been talking to, that we were going to try not to leave our archipelagic nation behind. And for all of the very exotic, speaking of Bahamian history, ways that, for example, even Grand Bahama was developed. All right, and that's a whole exotic story in which I'm not an expert. But they did make a commitment that this was an archipelagic nation. However, that the reality of the way the economy developed is that opportunity did become concentrated in the capital. So we have, it's not that they didn't know it was a problem. The fact that they actually have all of the political commitment to, baseline infrastructure, all right, in what was, when I was a child, 20 some islands. It's insane. The amount of money you have to pay to maintain a basic roads and so forth. That's a real commitment. I would say that the second thing that we've inherited, and Ole touched on it, we know that we're a small nation, but Scott Turnquist said it as well. We are in this post-colonial environment in which we doubt ourselves. We doubt for all of our pride as Bahamians. There's a kind of both xenophobia and lack of information, and then we bring in this large number of mostly white, mostly European descended people, and that we're still prisoners of the, oh my goodness, if things are going wrong here and they aren't where they should be, maybe we are deficient. And what I would say, I'm going to guess, like the fact that we can have a xenophobia toward what I think is a Yoruba name, when that is the ancestry of, I can say, hi, how are you doing? Like that's, but I learned that in Pennsylvania. All right. That we have the set of cultural problems. We concentrated, as Dr. Sachs was saying, teachers have done a good job, sort of promulgating to our young people that the Bahamas is a nation in its own right. And that we should work on developing it. We all have a commitment to it. I think getting us to overcome, to be true globalists, to value sort of all cultures, to be really expansive, that this is a problem that we share with a lot of the post-colonial world, and that and it's not a problem that it didn't crop up in 2022. It was there in the late 1960s, and it is how we think about like what it means to say, and to not, and I've grown up in, a good bit of education and comfort and all of these things. And like, that we can have a secure Bahamian identity and also welcome immigrants. We can understand our relationship with Haiti. All right. And not, I can tell you the lowest moment in my life as a Bahamian, far and away. A man came, a French man who worked for the UN. There'd been some kind of disturbance at the detention center, the immigrant detention center on Carmichael Road. And he came in and he made this speech about globalism. And a white man from France talked about the importance of globalism and thinking about your neighbors. And he was sent by the UN, and he, in a kind of peacekeeping way, and so it was his job to say those things. But my God, If a person has to come from France. And so in this sense, the cultural things that we're still fighting in terms of thinking, and as I said, it's easy to do that from a position of comfort. I know that. But I think as a country, if we can have a kind of, to Dr. Sachs' point, if we can have more ideas and feel bolder with them and feel more secure about that, if that's one of the things we do with this 50th, like I want us to take this moment to seize it, because we have a chance. And I think that the leadership of the country at this moment, like if we said in 2017, excuse me, country, I think you should pay attention. But we're gonna have this moment when we can say more ideas.
I think about your father all the time. Dr. Adderley, my good friend, who
That makes two of us.
yes, who was the first Minister of Foreign Affairs in an independent Bahamas. And I often think about what would he think of where we are now. But let's go beyond that. And let me ask this concluding question to all of you. And I'm going to start with Senator Claire. Tell me, where do you think we are going as a country, the Bahamas, given where we have come from over these years since 1973? Where are we heading? Whither goest thou, Bahamas?
I feel the least qualified to answer.
Well, you have the connection. Go ahead.
I'm going to say, I think you're going upward. I think that the talent is there. I hear it in the discussion today. I think the technology brings us closer. And if we open up just a little bit and allow people in, open our minds just a little bit, even someone like me who may not even be considered all that much Bahamian, but I have a love for my people worldwide, globally, and especially in my beginnings where I come from. I have a place in my heart. I'm just going to say one thing, sometimes I watch television and I'm seeing all these people buying property and opening businesses in the Bahamas, and they are non-Black people. These are people, so some, in a way, when I talk to younger people, my family and others, they're like, well, they're not making opportunities for us to go there and do something like that. I think that we have to build Bahamas for Bahamians. We have to build a Bahamas for Bahamians. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm a little stuck.
Thank you.
You do just.
Okay. Scotland West, same question. Where are we going?
That's a hard one. My honest answer is I do not know, right? But I'll tell you.
Are we on the right track though?
I'm generally optimistic, right? And I'm generally optimistic because as far back as I can look, I think there's a lot of evidence of us as a country just generally punching above our weight, right? And that's what generally, even though we can all sit here and talk about opportunities or missed opportunities, I think the one thing that's been consistent is that we have punched above our weight. And that's one of the things that makes me proud, keeps me proud, and keeps me very optimistic about where we're going.
Dr. Sachs.
I want to talk about the small person. Where we need to go is creating that room and welcome for all Bahamians. Because I'll give you one small example of something that happened to me. I was visiting a particular minister's office in the Bahamas. And I happened to walk in the office and was blown away by the artwork. And I was commenting on the artwork. And that person asked me, who are you and who are your people? You don't need to belong to any particular group of people to be welcome. And I want to go back to what we have all been talking about today is there is a need for expansiveness, a welcome to all Bahamians, regardless of who their people are and where they come from. As Bahamians, everyone deserves room to grow, opportunities to grow. and to feel part of the country and not to feel disenfranchised because I don't have access. I don't have the monies to buy groceries. I don't have the monies to do this or that because I didn't have the opportunities. Because some people are hoarding it all for themselves. That is where we need to go, beyond family members, beyond friends, and to provide opportunities for all.
Thank you. Dr. O'Leary?
Well, forward, right? Upwards and onwards. That's where I think we're going. I think we have a lot of Bahamians with a lot of new progressive ideas. I think what we all seem in consensus with is that the Bahamas needs to embrace new mindsets and new strategies in terms of how we educate one another, the different avenues that we can pursue to take our country in a different direction. And we talked earlier about there being a seesaw, right? And I think PLP-FNM, same people my whole life, same politicians my whole life, same thing, same exact agenda. I think it's time to let go of that. And going forward, it's time to embrace new ideas, new directions for this country that could take us forward instead of being stuck in place, right? Stuck dancing around the same mentalities and the same old problems. Let's allow the new generation, these people talking and these people who have new ideas to take us forward. So that's what I think.
Dr. Adderley, we give you the last word.
Well, we managed to get through an hour and a half without bringing up the Honorable Paul Lawrence Adderley, but I will tell you, and this is a true story that I rarely share publicly, to this point about new ideas. In the late 60s, because there was no internet, and they're constantly mimeographing things, or God knows who was typing it. I don't even know how they were photocopying it, all right? And they would have these lists. And one of the last political conversations I had with my father, he showed me one of these, and it was like a little booklet, like 10 things we could do to make the Bahamas better. And he said to me, to Dr. Sachs' point, he said, boy, sweetie, we made up these big fancy ideas, handed these papers to ordinary Bahamians, and they believed we could do it. And it was fancy ideas like primary schools for everyone.
Yeah.
Like an expanded Princess Margaret Hospital. All right. Like women's access to political process. Mm-hmm. And that is, I do think the pandemic has been a secret blessing in this way, that our social duties to one another, that the job of this country, to Dr. Sachs' point, is to look after all Bahamians.
Yes.
All right. And that it's not like we have money or we don't have money, or we can control this virus or we don't control this virus. We clearly don't. I think I am optimistic because I think our social commitment to one another, all right, was reinvigorated by the suffering of both Dorian and the pandemic on its heels. And this sense that I want us to come up with some fanciful ideas about how we can better care for one another. And it's going to take some persuading, because if you look at, to Dr. Sachs' experience, to think about sort of nepotism and hoarding and the inequities we have, if we say that in the spirit of this 50th anniversary, all right, that we are actually going to have bolder ideas, all right, that we're going to have bolder ideas and a more inclusive sense of our democracy, and no demonizing any idea, even if it's one that's unpopular with this party or that party or this, religious group or that. Everything is on the table. And I am optimistic. I think the Bahamas is poised actually to be essentially more, even more remarkable. I think we have the opportunity to see even more remarkable change in the next 20 years.
The greatest little nation on earth.
Very good.
The greatest little nation on earth.
Very good. I guess you all join in that sentiment. Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Optimistic note, I'd like to thank you all for participating in this webinar that we hope to share with all of the broadcast facilities in the Bahamas in this independence period. Thank you very much for a very healthy discussion here today. Thank you very much.
This was so much. Thank you to the embassy for this initiative. Yeah.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all of the embassy employees here who participated in organizing this forum, particularly Sonia Rose for the hard work that she's done, and all of the embassy staff here, as well as the consulates in the United States of America. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
you.
It was
Bye.
fantastic.
Oh,
Yeah.
Cordell,
Happy
let's link.
Independence.
I
Yes,
see you,
yes,
Cordell.
Love this.
Yeah.
The
Love
greatest
this.
little country in the world.
Thank you.
Indeed, indeed.